For number two, for Free to Be Festive, I am so excited about tonight's call. It is one of my absolute favorite favorite topics to dive into, and it is also something that is so important, like so important when it comes to following through with your goals and being able to prioritize how you're wanting to lead your life. Like this is not just for the silly season and like around the time of Christmas and things like that. It is something that needs to be implemented into your entire life. But it definitely is much more important this time of year, and that is setting boundaries. I just love boundaries so much. And until I started implementing boundaries, I really didn't get very far in my life. So we want to be setting boundaries for yourself, and boundaries with others. And this is what we call internal and external boundaries. Um, there are lots of different things that people can think that boundaries are. And I know people like know about boundaries, but until you really dive into why they are so important, and what like comes from implementing boundaries, that's where the changes are really made as much as possible. So, what are boundaries? Um, Boundaries are guidelines, rules, or a limit that you choose to set within your life. They can be physical or emotional boundaries, and they can be strict or loose. And that can change between who or what circumstances you are setting them. So you can have boundaries for certain circumstances. You can have certain boundaries for certain people that you don't have with other people. And you can really allow them to be super strict in some respects, and other boundaries can be nice and loose that are dependent on your situation and circumstance. So we don't want to play hard and fast with our boundaries all the time, because that really doesn't allow us to be flexible within our lives. So they definitely can be strict or loose, and they can change with who you're setting them with and when you're setting them. So we need to look at where you can put boundaries into your life, especially within the silly season. So personal boundaries are limits that help us to clearly distinguish who we are and what we need, from other people, and then also other people's needs as well. Creating and maintaining personal boundaries is a key way to build physical, emotional, and psychological well-being. Like it is the most important way for you to be able to build a full, strong sense of well-being in every aspect of your life, your physical life, your emotional life, and your psychological life. So there are 6 different types of boundaries that you can implement. The first one being a physical boundary. This is your personal space, privacy, and boundaries around your body. The second is sexual boundaries, so expectations concerning intimacy with others and yourself. Number 3 is intellectual. So intellectual boundaries around your thoughts and beliefs. That's a big one in the silly season, a very important one, that you can implement with not only other people, but yourself as well. Emotional, so emotional boundaries around your feelings and how you feel and how others feel. Financial, also very important during the silly season. How you use, spend, save, and loan money. Big boundaries come into play there. And then the most important one in terms of the festive season, and pretty much with anybody that's ever been, labeled as a people pleaser or a hard worker, boundaries around time. How you set boundaries with your work, your social life, and your personal time. This one is big for the silly season. So I want you to think about boundaries that you believe to be good, and ones that you already have in place for yourself. Let me know in the Facebook group. I would love to hear about them. And let me know what ones that you think that you need to implement as well. I would love to hear about that too. So a few examples of exhibiting healthy boundaries may look like being able to say no, to anything that you don't want. You would be amazed at how many people have, and especially women, struggle to say no, in terms of all of the boundaries that I just listed. And also accepting when somebody else says no, that's a boundary as well. Being able to clearly communicate both your wants and needs and feel comfortable in doing so, honoring and respecting your own needs and the needs of others. So upholding those boundaries and respecting others' values, beliefs, and opinions, even if they're different from your own. This can come up a lot in the silly season, being around family and friends that you don't often see, especially if they have different views. Feeling free to disclose and share information where it's appropriate, and also choosing not to share when it's also inappropriate to do so. So this can be, in the festive season, very important around food and body weight issues, commenting on others' bodies, having people comment about your body, having people comment about your eating behavior and things like that. This is where you absolutely need to be able to feel free and comfortable to implement these boundaries, and being able to state your boundaries in what you will and won't accept in terms of body shaming, food shaming, and anything that falls under those umbrellas is so important. Though boundaries can be flexible, they do not compromise, like we do not want to compromise themselves in an unhealthy way. So if you're not willing to follow through with your boundaries, it can be quite unhealthy. And if we live a life without boundaries, we're welcoming a life where there's very little respect from yourself or from other people. So I say from yourself with so much emphasis, because if you can't put boundaries in, you will find that your self-worth and your self-respect becomes basically non-existent. Unhealthy boundaries. So where we have unhealthy boundaries with others, your safety within the relationship you have with that person is compromised. So you really can't have a safe, healthy relationship with someone unless you have strong boundaries. So this will lead to dysfunctional relationships where people's needs are not being met. And then that turns into guilt, shame, resentment, and it just, you cannot have a healthy relationship with somebody without healthy boundaries in place. So a few examples of exhibiting unhealthy boundaries. So having a difficult time saying no when you want to and you need to, having trouble accepting no from others when they have stated a boundary for you, not clearly communicating your wants and needs, easily compromising on personal values. So putting your personal values aside, especially in the silly season, in terms of alcohol, eating, your time, your money, all of those kind of things, to please other people, compromising your beliefs and your opinions to satisfy others, being coercive or manipulative to get others to do something that they don't want to do. And that is something that people will find if you're struggling with your food, you will have others do to you as well. And usually, this is something I talk to my clients about. That's a them problem. So you'll find for people who don't want to look at their relationship with food and their eating behaviors, when you are doing the work on your eating and your food and your relationship with food and your relationship with your body and your health, people will be quite manipulative, to push their views and their beliefs and coerce you to do the things that you don't want to do, because you're reflecting in them something that they're not doing. You're putting your hand up and saying, actually, I'm working on myself. And that is reflecting that they're not. So they will try to be quite coercive and manipulative into making you forget your beliefs and to stop you doing what you want to be doing to make themselves feel better. So this is where boundaries are so fucking important. And then oversharing personal information as well. You don't have to feel the need to dive into what you're doing, what you're focusing on, what your main goals are, and things like that from the silly season, with everybody. And so you pick and choose who you want to share that information with. And I would only be sharing that information with people that you've got strong boundaries with. So we have, as I've mentioned, internal and external boundaries. So whilst it's fantastic to set boundaries with other people, it can be even more important to start with setting your own boundaries for how you lead your life and how you go about your goals. So I want to really have you thinking about how you're going to set your own internal values and your own internal boundaries that you're going to put in place for yourself, especially around this time of year. So internal boundaries are promises we make to ourselves about what we will or won't tolerate from ourselves and other people. External boundaries are boundaries we set with others about what we will or will not tolerate from them. There's a very, very big difference here. And I want you to be well aware that there is those two different sets of boundaries and you need to work on both of them. Both of them are just as important as the other. So here's an example. Let's imagine that you don't like when people call you after 9 p.m. because it interrupts your bedtime routine. So if you then get a call at 9:30 p.m., you can set an external boundary by picking up the phone and telling that person, I don't take calls after 9 p.m. Sorry, I'll talk to you tomorrow. You could also set an internal boundary by simply not picking up the phone and meeting your own need for no phone calls. So setting an external boundary, if you haven't already set that boundary with people, I would be answering the phone or sending a text message and say, hey, sorry, I'm not normally on my phone after 9 p.m. Sorry, I've never mentioned that to you before, but just letting you know, I'll chat to you tomorrow. I'm trying to get some sleep. If you have already set that external boundary with the person, this is where you need to work on your internal boundaries and ignore the phone call. You ignore it. You hold strong on your boundaries and you just let it go straight to message bank. You do not need to send them a sorry message. You do not need to explain yourself if you've already set that boundary and they're crossing your boundary. If you can't set your own internal values and then follow through on them and uphold them for yourself, how can you expect others to follow and respect the boundaries you put in place for them? Have a think about that and let me say it again. If you can't set your own internal values and then follow through on them and implement them, how can you expect others to follow and respect your boundaries you put in place? If you were to pick up that phone call a couple of times after 9 o'clock, of course they're going to fucking keep calling you. Of course they are, because you have said that you don't take phone calls, but you are taking phone calls. So of course they're not going to remember, Sarah doesn't take phone calls after 9 o'clock. I won't bother her. Because you've broken that boundary. They don't care about it. It's not of a high importance because you've shown them it doesn't matter. And this all comes down to your own self-worth. It has everything to do with how much respect you have for yourself, how much self-worth you find from within. You respecting your internal values comes down to your self-worth. So this silly season, if you want to approach it in a free and flexible way, then setting internal boundaries with yourself is a must. This can relate to food, setting a core internal value with yourself that you're going to have protein and nutrients with every meal. I don't care what else you eat, but make sure it's got protein and nutrients within every single meal. Telling yourself that and setting that boundary. Not ordering takeaway on weeks with lots of events. So if you've got a full social calendar and you're eating out 3 times, I'm going to set an internal boundary and a value that I'm not getting takeaway if I don't have to. Drinking 2 liters of water and 3 liters when you're having alcohol. Limiting alcohol to no more than 4 drinks per event. Those are just examples of what, and you can pick and choose what suits you, what feels best for you. And literally like what, take from this, what, don't see my examples and go, yep, that's a good boundary because Sarah's a nutrition coach and she said that's what I should do. Have a think about what affects your life, what your internal values are, and create boundaries from your internal values. not what other people are saying and not what everybody else is saying is healthy. So these can also really relate to time and how you share it. Boundaries around how many events you say yes to. How full is your social calendar, and how is your calendar impacting your health and your internal values? How is it draining your mindset? Saying no when you want to say no and stay home when you would rather be at home. Setting that boundary that your downtime is important to you. And if you don't honor that boundary that you need downtime, you are going to affect your self-worth and your self-respect and put yourself in a draining situation that will not help you get through the silly season as positive and as festive as you can be. Prioritizing sleep and rest to look after yourself rather than people pleasing. If you are drained, if you are tired, if you do not have the energy and you get invited to another event that's going to keep you out late or get you up early, and you're not prioritizing your sleep and your rest and your downtime, that is showing yourself disrespect and low self-worth, that you would rather please that person than say no and put in a boundary. So important that you acknowledge that this is what makes or breaks a good relationship with your emotional state, your physical state, and your psychological state. Have a think about what internal values you have and set your internal boundaries from there. Our internal boundaries can include promises to yourselves. That's what I want you to think of it as a promise to yourself. I will only spend an hour at this social event. I will not participate in conversations about body weight because they trigger me. I will not participate in conversations about body weight because they trigger me. I will not participate in any body shaming or food shaming conversation. I will not entertain that in my world. That is a value that I have personally, me, Sarah. I will not entertain body shaming or food shaming in any aspect of my life. That is a hard no. And everybody in my life knows that because I have implemented that internal boundary. I will not take on any new commitments when I'm already overbooked. I will not make plans with friends when I'm tired or needing a rest. These are all promises you can make to yourself. I want you to be able to implement these boundaries and be able to say to your friends, I'm so sorry. I am already so tired. I'm so busy. I really couldn't handle another event where I have to give more mental capacity and more energy. I love you, but I don't have that in me. Christmas and New Year's Eve are meant to be times that you spend with your friends and family and loved ones and have an amazing time. You do not want to get to those days and be burnt the fuck out and sleep the whole time. When I used to be a beauty therapist, I used to work 4 12-hour days leading up to Christmas Day. I worked 12 hours on Christmas Eve, and I didn't even make it to dark on Christmas Eve to take my nieces and nephews Christmas light looking, waiting for Santa on the carols because I was so burnt out and so fucking exhausted that I couldn't even enjoy that time of year because I didn't set any boundaries and I worked too hard. What are you missing out on because you can't set internal boundaries? So, one of my favorite quotes is by Brene Brown about boundaries. If you haven't read any of her books, I'm looking at about 3 of them right now. She is amazing. When we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. That sounds like a you problem. When we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. So when we fail to put boundaries in place, we feel shit. And we feel like we're being used and we feel like we're being mistreated. But it's your fault because you have failed to set the boundary. So why are boundaries so important, especially during the silly season? A boundary is a limit or space between you and another person, a clear place where you begin and another person ends. The purpose of building a healthy boundary is, of course, to protect you and take good care of you. Have a read of that again and go through it and think about it over in your mind. Boundaries are not selfishness, which so many women believe setting boundaries is being selfish. That's so not true. They are lines we draw around ourselves that help to buffer us against the demands of life. Life is fucking hard. It's busy, it's stressful, it's overwhelming. Your boundaries draw a line that basically will help you buffer against all of those demands and protect you. They protect you so that you can keep your internal values. They communicate to others how we choose to distribute our personal resources, and they help us manage our relationships with others to avoid becoming depleted. Avoid becoming I'm going to keep repeating myself until this sinks in. Boundaries are protective, and without them, we are consciously or unconsciously offering others the power to decide how our energy is being used. You are letting other people drain your energy, or you are allowing yourself store your energy. Contrary to what many people think, setting boundaries is not being selfish or prioritizing yourself or putting your needs over others. It is the opposite. Having limits and boundaries is being generous to others, as this means you are giving them the highest quality of yourself. Have a think about that. It helps ensure high quality relationships, both personal and in the workplace. If you are implementing boundaries and protecting your energy and making sure that your internal values and goals are being met, you are giving people the highest quality of yourself. You're not giving them a drained, resentful, mistreated, used version of yourself that doesn't have the energy to show up and be present and give that person literally give that person the energy that they deserve, because they're giving you the same thing. If I've reserved my energy for a social event with one of my close friends and I've put boundaries in place to make sure that I'm giving her 100% of my time and attention, I expect the same thing from her. I don't want her to show up burnt out, not able to hold a conversation, not being able to concentrate on what I'm talking about. Because I've made that time for her in my life, I expect the same. And I want you to respect yourself enough to expect the same from the people in your life. This is why this is my favorite. Boundaries are important because they help promote self-care. They allow you to become a better leader to your team, the people in your life, and they help create better environments in every aspect of your life. When you put boundaries in place and you effectively tell other people in your life about those boundaries, you are giving them permission to do the same. You are giving them permission to say, hey, this is the thing that people do now. We set boundaries and this is why. So you can be a leader in that aspect to the people in your world. It's extremely normal this time of year to be feeling overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, and approaching burnout. And if you are, then you might be feeling a little underwhelmed about the silly season. Definitely not enjoying it to its full potential. The busyness and hype is definitely not for everyone. It can be an incredibly lonely time and a time when grief is heightened and emotions are extra sensitive. Sometimes this time of year, the holiday season, is for some people the most stressful time of year. Your anxiety spikes and it feels like all you can do is just push through and take day by day. If this is where you're at, boundaries is what you need. So I've put over here some broken boundaries that are common over the festive season. Being asked questions about your personal life that make you feel uncomfortable, you don't have to entertain that. Being expected to rescue family members from crisis in this time of year, that's quite common. Being expected to spend money that you'd rather not spend. Being dragged into conversation based on judgment and gossip. Being expected to spend time with people whose values, politics, or views are very different from your own. Being expected to fill up your calendar. Being expected to eat food in amount or a certain type that you wouldn't normally eat. This is not a boundary violation if you enjoy it. If it, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like if it's not what you normally eat, but you enjoy eating it, that's definitely not a broken boundary. But if you wouldn't normally eat certain foods or certain amounts of foods and people are encouraging you to do so, that's definitely a broken boundary. Be expected to be happy this time of year. Absolutely fucking not. That's not a prerequisite for Christmas. Being expected to hear and accept comments about your physical appearance. Again, what I've been talking about in body shaming. So these are all things that you don't have to tolerate, and you can put boundaries in place to make sure that you conserve your energy and your self-respect to not tolerate them. And it is absolutely okay to put boundaries in place, and it's not selfish for you to do that. Doesn't make you any type of negative, shouldn't be looked at in any type of negative way in terms of inserting those boundaries into your life. Strong boundaries that can help in the silly season if you choose to implement them. Choosing not to engage with people in conversations that drain your energy. Choosing not to engage with people or conversations that are triggering for you. Saying no to events that if you attended, you would have been sacrificing your authenticity, or have you regressed to a past version of yourself. So drugs, alcohol, binge eating, all of those kind of things. Even conversations, like surrounding yourself with people that their conversations don't bring you up. They aren't intelligent conversations that you want to be around. They're judgmental. They're pushing like triggers onto you in terms of, they're just very, I'm trying to say this in a polite way, immature conversations that would regress you to be a past version of yourself if you've outgrown those conversations. Saying no to events or time demands that leave you with no white space in your calendar. White space or unscheduled time is essential for emotional and physical decompressing. So having a calendar that looks back to back with no white space in it. Being mindful of the emotional and physical demands of travel and choosing to do so based on your reserves rather than the expectations of others, splitting your Christmas day into 3, 4 different houses. Absolutely not. That's definitely not something that you have to do just because people expect you to do it. Having conversations that support conscious gifting to avoid spending money on stuff and receiving stuff that is not meaningful or wanted. Very important. Giving yourself permission to leave gatherings before you are too depleted of your energy. Staying true to yourself and your growth, even when this challenges people who are close to you or invested in the previous version of yourself. Letting go of friends who no longer serve you and no longer feel good to be at their level. Communicating what types of conversations you will and will not tolerate. Now that we're getting into boundaries, I'm sure you can see why this is all so important. So, what to expect from the festive season if your boundaries aren't strong? Binge eating, binge drinking, and burnout. Very, very massive ones. But so if your boundaries aren't strong in the festive season, it does not set you up to be able to be free and festive at all during the silly season. If you cannot set up and maintain your boundaries with yourself and others over the next few weeks, the goals you set for yourself in order to celebrate this year, freer and happier than anything, will feel completely out of reach. So boundaries are where it all starts. Without these, we have no sense of self or self-care in order to implement what I'm trying to teach you within this course. So these are some of the possibilities that you could experience without your set boundaries. Like I've said, binge eating is a massive one. Overindulging, feeling sick, eating more food than you would normally because you feel pressure to. Same thing with drinking, binge drinking more and more than you normally would, to a point where you don't feel good about it, or like you have broken an internal value, depleting your energy to the point of burnout, feeling very underwhelmed and not enjoying the festive season, becoming triggered by others, which is obviously very detrimental to your mental health, and having a really negative start to the new year. Feeling sick within your body, feeling like you've let go of all of your health and fitness goals, feeling very tired, feeling completely burnt out in terms of your energy, very lethargic, not sleeping well, and just needing a break, like needing a holiday after the holidays. So, how do we create boundaries? So, firstly, you need to work out why each boundary is important to you and how you will benefit from setting it. Setting boundaries for the first time may seem very overwhelming, and scary. So, we need to start small and build them up over time as you become more comfortable with it. It can make you feel like you're being a bitch. It can make you feel very selfish, like you are rude, as well. So we need to make sure that we start small and build up. But you need to implement them now. If like now, yesterday. If you set them from the start, it's going to be so much easier for you to continue on with them. So everybody knows where they stand, and it takes out a lot of confusion and possible like hurt feelings. Once they are in place, you need to treat them as like law. Like this is the law. There is no like wishy-washy with it. Be consistent with them and try and uphold them as much as you can. So this will reinforce your boundary to you and other people, the people you're setting them with. You need to talk about them to yourself and to other people. Communication is absolutely key. If someone is overstepping your boundaries, you need to be able to talk to them. This doesn't have to be an uncomfortable or confrontational conversation, but you need to assert yourself. Being assertive builds self-trust and, again, self-worth. And you must follow through on your boundaries and teach others how to treat you. Understand that boundaries are essential for your own mental clarity and care, but you don't have to be 100% rigid with them 100% of the time. Sometimes it's important to go with your heart instead of your head and just like let it be, as long as you feel good about that decision. So decide what's important to you. Think about your internal values and create your internal and external boundaries from there. Start small, set them straight away, stay consistent with them, communicate them, be assertive, and understand that they can be flexible. They don't have to be hard and fast. This is how you create your boundary, and this is how we communicate our boundaries. So, you need to ask for what you want, not be upset about what you got. As I said before from that quote, if you're not implementing boundaries and you feel like shit because of it, that's a you problem. You need to ask for what you want, not be hurt by what you got. Take responsibility. This is about you, not them. So you need to be very careful with your communication. I prefer if you would do this. I prefer you don't talk about that. Not you do this all the time and it makes me feel like shit. That's not a great way to communicate. We need to explain why we're implementing this boundary, why it's important to us, why it is the way it needs to be, as how it's affecting us. You have to be polite so you don't come off as confrontational or abrupt. Don't hesitate, because this will create resentment, and that's fully on you. If you hesitate to put your boundary in place, you will create resentment towards that person and towards yourself, because you will fully know that it's your fault that this is happening. And that's nothing good comes from resentment. So to inform someone that they're crossing a boundary in your relationship it can be a very challenging task, right? So learning how to communicate boundaries in a relationship is not only difficult, but it is incredibly necessary. It's necessary because the only person hurting is you, like I've just explained. When you don't communicate your boundaries, it's only affecting you. And it's probably going to break down your relationship with that person. So effective communication is key. Communicating your thoughts in an honest but respectful way is healthier than avoiding the conversation completely. Don't assume you know how the other person is feeling, even if you feel like you know them really well. You just can't assume that they understand or they get it or you know how they feel. Especially relate in all relationships, basically. So describe your situation using I statements and share the feeling you are experiencing in this situation. I statements, not you statements, I statements. I feel this, I like this, I prefer this, I want this. Share how it makes you feel and your experience during that situation. Express what you would like to happen instead in the situation. So give them an alternative. Make sure that you express like how you would prefer it to go or how you would prefer to feel or what you would prefer that they do or don't do. Share with them the positive effects that that new situation will have for you and them and their relationship and how you can both grow from it. So an example of communication when a boundary isn't being met, I felt XYZ this way when XYZ this happened and I need XYZ moving forward. I felt when and I need, not you did this, it was shit, and from now on I need you to do this. Nah, that's not going to fly. How not to communicate is like what you want to avoid is using blaming statements and not taking ownership for your own feelings because how you feel is your fault. So we need to own how what they have done has made you feel, accept it, and explain it to them. Without implementing the right communication, you run the risk of becoming angry, defensive, and your chance of implementing your boundary in a healthy way is basically non existent. Communicating your boundaries is key, and you have to make it about you and not about them. I have absolutely loved taking you through boundaries, internal and external. I hope you can see how they're so important, not only now in the silly season through December leading into 2023, but in every area of your life. I want you to go away now and think about what your internal values are, how that's a boundary, if you're upholding that boundary for yourself, and how you need to implement it into your life as an external boundary for others. I want you to have a think about who is crossing your boundaries, if it's you or people in your life, and how you need to change that. And what I also really want you to take away from tonight is how setting boundaries is a healthy thing, a good thing. It's so important in all areas of your life for your self-worth, your self-respect, your self-love, but also to create sustainable, healthy relationships that will make you grow and will make you both better people. And how I said that if you do this in your life, you are giving everybody else in your life permission to do the same and watch your world expand and mature and everybody around you just live a little easier. I would love to know your feedback on tonight's call. Let me know in our Facebook group or send me a message. Have a great night and I will see you 6 p.m. Monday the 12th. Have a good night, ladies.